Cool. Hi everyone. My name is Denise Mundo, but you can call me Den. In a lot of platforms, I am known as Den du Monde, just a French version of my name, essentially. I am in my final year as a marketing student at Concordia University. I am also the co-president of the Filipino organization of Concordia University students, or FOCUS. And yeah, I'm also a young and aspiring multidisciplinary creative. That is an interesting title because I remember when the promo for this went out, my mother saw it and asked me, what does that mean, anak, anak being my child? And so that's a great question. Essentially, I dabble, well, more so, I try to master a bunch of art forms in order to express my thoughts, ideas, and my community. And admittedly, this is kind of a big turn in like what our original presentation was, as in me and Una. And I will be upfront now that like I'm not very used to speaking on like my past and like my artistic expression and journey. However, I think it's a great exercise to be able to do this. But one of the things that actually led me into being more artistically expressive is because I lack the verbal, I guess, capability to speak my mind. But here we are. My agenda for today is really to give a little bit of an info bomb of my childhood and contextualize how I am as an artist and why I do things, why I'm informed in certain ways. And then afterwards, I'll talk more about my principal disciplines and how they've connected to my growth as a person and as an artist. And more importantly, at the very end, I'll speak on why I think these disciplines have really shaped other ventures that are beyond them. So enough of that. We'll talk a little more about my childhood. Then the shy kid, to folks who are here that may have known me, have met me. It may surprise you to think that I was very shy as a child. And I still do pretty much identify with that term. But it was, yeah, we'll get into it. Just a little bit of context on like where I'm from. I was born in the Philippines in Quezon City. And at the age of 2.5, myself and my mother moved to Qatar. Yes, the FIFA World Cup, Qatar. And that's where my dad was at the time, still is. And yeah, we joined him. We grew our family there. My brother was born there. All my cousins, aunties, uncles popped up. We had our own chosen family, all of that. And so from the age of 2.5 to 17, Qatar was home. And as I mentioned, I was quite a shy kid. And that was very worrying to my family. They were worried about how I would socialize with the world once I become an adult and all sorts of things. And so their way to remedy that was they would sign me up in the most random things. Like I did violin and then piano and then this and that, ballet and all sorts of things. Eventually I actually started to gain genuine interest myself for things. And these interests, they were creative outlets. And now in hindsight, I believe that they were creative outlets because I was a shy kid and I didn't know exactly how to speak my mind. Just through conversation, I needed some sort of tool to get me to realize things. So yeah, speaking of what were those things that I ended up sticking with, in the order of the most therapeutic to the most purposeful, it was painting, music, writing, and film. Those are principal disciplines, as I mentioned, because I feel like together they've created foundations for me to, expand my work into event making, brand making, marketing, and XYZ. But yeah, so we'll talk about the first discipline, painting, then the painter. I really got into painting quite young as a child, but in high school, it was my specialization in our curriculum. We did certain things. So for 2 years of my life, it was just 3 a.m. paintings, 3 a.m. this. And at first it was just something to do to pass the class. But eventually I did evolve quite an attachment to painting. I saw it as, well, relating to the actual art of like escapism and surrealism in paint. I saw that as like an outlet to escape as well. I stood out in every room that I've ever been in. I was the only Filipino kid in my grade. I was 1 out of 4 Filipinos in my school, I think. And so, I wasn't necessarily the mainstream. And then when I got into more of my religious side at the age of 14, and I started being more active in the Filipino spaces, meeting Filipino kids my age, they were all too Filipino to me, in comparison to me, because they went to Filipino schools and they spoke the language better, XYZ. And so everywhere I went, any day of the week, I stood out. And so I think through painting, I wanted to see someone or meet someone, these characters that I could potentially relate to, people that stood out. Surrealism itself is a way to stand out in art. And so as you can see here, I'm just going to be providing examples of sketches and paintings I've done through the years. Essentially that's my portfolio. As you notice now, it's a lot of internal work, a lot of trying to find myself in my disciplines. And that continues on in my next one, musical composition and lyricism. So I grew up in a pretty musically oriented family. You know, my dad was a choir master, my mom sang at church, all of that. And my brother is a piano prodigy. And so it was just kind of a thing in the house to hear music. I also, as I said, I was put into music classes. I was in music school for 3-4 years. But I really stuck with voice and just lyricism. I've created songs and mixtapes and EPs, and in this sense, I really got into songwriting because now it was kind of developing more of a way to express deep thoughts that I had that I couldn't do verbally. So I think through painting, it was a lot of discovery, but now we're here in the verge of trying to speak my mind as a teenager. And so, yeah, and I could only do that through song for some reason. In my household, and I'm pretty sure a lot of people can, you know, relate to this. It was an immigrant household that was very much sacrifice, and acts of service was the way that we showed love. There wasn't a lot of expression on the words end. And so I think this is really why I got so attached to making lyrics, is that I could speak my mind about what I felt in this avenue. And then moving forward, writing. So growing up in Qatar, this is the first time I've ever mentioned it since moving to Montreal, but I was a sketch YouTuber, and I did have some sort of a following. And so I love to write skits. I just loved writing in general. And then on the side, I would make these stories and I would tell myself one day I'll put them in Hollywood. But yeah, and it's always been almost a therapeutic thing, but more recently, it's becoming more and more of a purposeful activity that I'm doing, that I want to actually, you know, mobilize into something. And I put comedian there as a question mark because I just find comedy very, very interesting, and it's potentially something I want to narrow down more and hone in more in later years. But I think it's not because I like comedy because of the haha, it's funny, but more of the cadence and the pacing. And I think there's some sort of artistic, there's an artistry to it to be able to deliver a punchline. And also the traumatic experience that comedians have faced, their ability to kind of shift the narrative and make it digestible and eye level for people to understand themselves, I think is super cool. And yeah, essentially my interest in writing and conceptualizing has really led to some great initiatives like Showpow the documentary, or Showpow the brand, you know, being at focus for the last 4 years and building it from the ground up, being part of projects by Seed Concordia, which are really for the empowering of education and the youth. And yeah, they've helped out in a lot of other projects. I'm sorry, I'm trying to put everything in a nutshell in 10 minutes, but yeah, this is the last one. Film and video editing, then the filmmaker. Out of all the 4 disciplines I've mentioned, this is the one that I feel like has the most potential to be my specialization in the future, just because I find that all the things I've learned in the last 3 disciplines are just here and in steroids. There is, you know, from the painting, I've learned how to visually represent myself, and you can do that in film. And then from writing, you can you can build content and somewhat, you know, pizzazz subject material so that people can understand where you're coming from. And then from music, there's this element of using the right tones, the right music, the pacing of things that I've learned that I think I can also apply into film. And these are just some of the projects that I've recently gotten myself into, like Colonial Philippines, a 3-part series on YouTube that talks about the history of the Philippines, Show Pow, the documentary, which will be screening tonight actually at Université de Montréal as part of the International Symposium. And it speaks on the Filipino diaspora in Montreal and the history that we've gone through. Yeah, I would play it, but I know we're run for time. But essentially what I want to leave is that I genuinely think that art and creativity are less talent, but more of tools to navigate the world. And I think that art has given me many ways to explore where I stand in the world and how I feel about myself, or things beyond me. And in this current phase of my artistry, I'm looking to try to reveal these things to others. I think that's also informed the way I lead projects, the way I lead people. I truly think I look at people's capabilities and situations, possibilities way before they prove me right. So yeah, and I think art can really enable people to express themselves. Without art and creativity, I just would have stayed as a shy kid, but now I'm a shy kid that just spoke for 10 minutes. So I think that's worth applauding for. Yeah, that's me.